And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Derry Bresee, who during her near-death experience went to a beautiful garden, and today we're going to learn about it. Derry, thank you for being my guest, and welcome.
Hello, Jeff. Yes, it was nice that you asked me to do this. This was happened in August of 1997, so that was about over 25 years ago. And I had been, and so what it was is that I was a home health nurse, and I was just coming in, and so I was seeing patients at a doctor's office, and then I was picking up my son. I'm trying to get this all straight now. Anyway, I just gotten done saying I was a home health nurse. That means that I was a home hospice nurse, which means that I would go to the doctor's office, get my list of what patients to see, and then go to see them around everywhere. And my son at that time, I just got a brand new car, and my son wanted to get a driver's license. He just turned 16. And it was my youngest son who just moved back in with me from Sacramento, where my ex-husband lived. So he came to there so he could get a license. And so then we took him to the DMV. I took him to the DMV, and he got his license. And then I was going to let him drive home from the DMV, and he came up, and we live in the outskirts of Las Vegas, and they were dirt roads, and they didn't have any stop signs, but it was a four-way stop, and so I was not born and raised in Las Vegas. I'd only been there for about a few years, so I didn't know all the details. But anyways, because anyone who lived a long time would know that there was a gravel pit down the road, and they would fill it up with gravel. And then when the gravel truck would get fully loaded, it would come up the road, and at that intersection where my son is stopped, they never stop because they can't get it fully loaded because it's on a little bit inclined. And so my son pulled out in front of him. He didn't realize that, neither did I, that they were going to hit us. And so they hit us and drug us about 80 feet, and until they finally stopped, and then they had to cut me out of the car, resuscitate me at the scene, call emergency, and then sent me to the hospital and I had to have emergency. I was bleeding in my brain, so I had to have emergency brain surgery. And sometime during that, and I stopped breathing, so I had to be resuscitated at the scene. I think that's what some guy was talking about afterwards. I don't know any of this because I was out of it. This is what people told me. And so then, then I was in the hospital for about a month, and they kept I've got seven brothers and sisters. My parents were still alive then. They all came down to visit me, and so they were all gathering and praying for me, and afraid that I was gonna, and they were very happy that I woke up. And so they had pretty much gone back to work, and so had my ex-husband gone back to work, and the nurse that's had gone to a nursing home kind of place. It wasn't a hospital, but they didn't want to keep me in ICU all that time, so they sent me in the places, can't remember what you call them, other than a hospital, like a nursing home, but it's for the people who had to be taken care of. And while I was there, I woke up one morning, and I said to him, and I talked, and the doctor who in charge of, she called my husband at work. He works for the city of Las Vegas as a plans and building inspector, and he said she woke up. And so he came down and quickly saw me, and I remember everything from waking up. Because when I wasn't totally out of it, I could hear voices and people's voices, and I knew that I wasn't in my body. In fact, I would remember about seeing my husband, wanting that I could remember from when I was not with it, that with my body, is that I was up above my bed, looking down at my body on the bed, and my husband was sitting on the bed, holding my hand, and I could read his thoughts, and He wanted me to wake up and I think, oh, I want more time with him. That was just before I came to. That was all the pre-stuff that happened before I came back to this earth. And so, and I didn't remember this until I'd come out of my coma and stuff. And it took me about a couple of weeks or a month to remember this. And I remembered it gradually, a little bit at a time, and came back to me gradually. And when I'm talking, and I remember walking with Christ, and he asked me if I wanted to stay there with him or come back to this earth. And that's when I immediately had that little vision with sitting on the bed with my hand, reading my husband's thoughts, and he was sitting on the bed. So, and I turned to Christ and said, I want more time. I want to live. And so he told me that I had a choice. I could stay there or come back here. And I came back.
All right. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Did you remember later about visiting with Jesus?
Yes, it's. I remember having this immediate thought that my spirit was once again in my body, and I could feel my body, and I could feel pain again. And I said, "Oh, I'm back." And then that thought came back to me, and I said, "Oh, I know where I was at," and came back to me gradually as I remember, as I'm getting full mental capacities, because I was sort of out of it. I couldn't speak, and I was paralyzed this whole left side of my body, and had to learn how to walk and talk, and I had a feeding tube, and I had a trach, and I had to have all that removed so I could start talking and thinking to others. And so people would come and visit me at church, and my husband brought me a chalkboard where I could, that I had beside the bed to write notes when people couldn't understand me. And so, and the nurses didn't know I was left-handed. They kept putting it on the right side of my body until somebody said, "She's left-handed, stupid."
So you had this NDE while you were in a coma, but right when you were waking up. Is that correct?
I'm not quite sure when the near-death experience. I don't know. I just remember coming out of my coma, gradually remembering it.
All of a sudden you were waking up, and then all of a sudden you were in this beautiful garden?
Well, it wasn't all of a sudden. It was sort of like remembering it, and then all of a sudden I was there. It's hard to explain.
Can you tell us what the garden looked like?
Yes, it had lots of vegetation, beautiful, big like palm leaves going everywhere, like you would see in a garden. But they glowed from underneath. They glowed from within, like they had lights underneath them, like day glow lights. Everything had all the green was glowing. It was glowing from around, and the water it had like a little trickling spring. That water that went down, and that I thought was water until I tried to drink and put my hand in it, and my hand went through, and it wasn't water. It was just what I thought in my mind, where I was at. That's what I remembered.
So it was basically all energy, and your mind created it to be water in a garden. Is that what you're saying? I
think so. Yes. Yeah. Because when I put my hand in, I felt no water. Didn't feel anything tangible. I just thought that, and then when I tried to touch it, I realized it wasn't actual water.
Do you feel like you were seeing your thoughts?
I believe that I was when I was talking to Christ. There's a lot of different communications when you're in the heavenly realm. You don't speak with your mouths. You speak with your minds, and you can read each other's thoughts and energies, and I don't believe there's any judgment in heaven. I believe that when you see another heavenly being like Christ, you can read his intentions for you, what he wants, and he can read yours. You're judged immediately by what you think, because they can read you, and so you can't hide anything. That's what I learned.
So at first, were you in the garden for some time, and then after you were there for a while, then Jesus appeared?
I'm not quite sure how long it was. All I know is I walked around a little bit, and then after I bent down and saw the water in my hand, and then stood back up, then he was there. I don't know the exact time frame of all that. I just know that he was there after I discovered that I was in a heavenly garden and I wasn't on earth.
What did Jesus look like?
It's hard for me to describe. My husband asked me that too, and so we were looking at all the near-death experiences and books from people. And this one gal painted it. Painter painted it. I said, "That's him." She's about that painting. But since then, my husband, we've since moved away, and he divorced me, and I have none of that stuff. So we had the portrait on the wall she painted, but it looked like Jesus. But it's hard for me to describe because I can't find the picture again.
A lot of people point out this picture painted by this young girl that Jesus kind of has maybe shoulder length hair and kind of a blue-green eyes.
That could have been him. Yes.
The famous picture. I wonder if that's the same picture.
It could be.
So you were there, and then Jesus.
He did have blue-green eyes. Yes.
He had blue-green eyes. Did you feel like he loved you and had enormous amount of love for you?
Oh yes, when he looked at us, we could read each other's thoughts and intentions, how he felt about me, and I knew that he could tell how I felt about him. You can't hide nothing.
Interesting.
And so to me, there's no judgment. You just and you are what you are, and you are to anybody you meet in heaven, I believe.
Was there anything that surprised you about Jesus?
No, but other than the fact that he was he gave me a choice to stay there or to come back to Earth. I don't know if that surprised me, but looking back at it, I think,
And why did you decide to return?
Because I saw when he asked me if I want to return, immediately I had my vision in my head. I saw myself as sick and comatose, laying in a hospital bed, and my husband sitting on the bed, holding my hand, talking to me, and I could read my husband's thoughts. And I said, I want more time with him.
Has this encounter with Jesus changed you religiously?
I would say yes.
In what way?
Well, it's deepened my belief in Christ and who he is and what he is in ways that I can't. I'll never ever question or have faith. It is absolute knowledge that he exists. It's like a perfect testimony, so to speak, that Christ is real.
I think you just said you believe in what he is. So can you tell us more about what he is?
Well, I was taught that Christ was the son of Jesus Christ, and he was created in heaven, and that he met and that Jesus and the Heavenly Father are not two people. Heavenly Father, it's his Father. Jesus Christ is my brother, as I am. We're both spirit children of God. And so he lived with God, and so did I in another place, like maybe the garden or something. And so they had all the spirits who hadn't had bodies yet were living in different dimensions of Earth. Now this is very this is what I'm taught in religion. So I don't know if this carries over. That's why I believe. That's what I remember. And so after I came to, I prayed a whole lot more, and I felt like I was getting answers. And the special things about the church that I always just sort of thought was special, now I know I have a real strong belief that they are what I learned and believe in.
After your NDE, have you noticed that you have any like psychic abilities or anything?
A little bit. I say that because I can tell when I see somebody what their intentions are, and if I want to be near them or want to talk to them. I avoid people or I go to them, and that to me that's it. I didn't have that ability before. Now it just comes to me. I've got it. It's part of who I am. I think, and I didn't have it before my NDE. And I think that I feel safe by having that too, especially now that I'm divorced.
Do you feel like it's more real over there or less real than here?
I think it's more complete.
What do you mean by that, complete?
I mean, I believe that once Jesus Christ came back to his body after death, and that it became complete. I know that I will die, but I'm not afraid of it, and I believe that I'm more complete, and that I'll never have it. I'll never go into outer darkness and be lost or anything. So I feel like I'm closer to returning to heaven this way.
And did you say that you don't fear death anymore?
I don't.
That's great. What do you think inspires you about your experience?
I believe, in looking back at it, all these things that happened to lead me up to that was all preparing my spirit to really embrace everything that I was learning again in the spirit world. Like so it had been about 3 years before that is that I had a real spiritual experience when I was dating my ex-husband now, and I got this witness that he was the Lord wanted him to bless me and help me through this part of life, and so I believe all these things, getting married to him and everything, that I needed all these things in place so that I could have this experience in heaven that I believe was that I planned for in the pre-existence that I knew about before I came to this earth that was going to happen. And when things had happened, I think about, yes, I remember this now. And I was prepared for it. And so everything that happened to it, looking back on it, I say, it's like I met my husband. He was right there for me, helping me cover through it all. I was supposed to happen, and it all happened. And both heaven and earth, all the beings within, help create this for me, because I believe that I'm much loved.
Do you believe that this NDE was pre-planned?
Yes, I do.
Do you think you planned it?
I think I did before I was born.
Interesting.
I think just like I believe that I chose my parents as a child, and I believe my children chose me. And when you get a little special thing you think about children, and you have a little thing with one child versus another. You said, now you feel something is emotional about that you knew each other in the pre-existence. I have several of my children I believe that with intimately. The others I don't as strongly, so I don't worry about that, because I only think about things that is presented to me through prayer.
I don't believe that's part of your religious training.
No, I don't think so either. But I do know that do you know much about the background about what we've trained?
As far as I know from speaking to you earlier, you're Latter-day Saint.
Yes, I am, and I come from pioneer background, and we come through and I've come through the seventh wife, who joined the church in Norway, and her husband died just before they came home, so she came over by boat from Norway to Utah, and while she was there, my great-grandfather, he had 6 wives by then, and so she was alone, a widow, and they're living in some barn in Utah, Salt Lake Valley. And so he came to her door, and I read his journal too. We wrote all about it, and he asked her to marry him. And she said, "I'll marry you, but I want to be sealed to my first husband in Norway, and then I'll be sealed to you." So even though I've got Garden of Blood in me, which is from Scotland, I'm sealed to this Norwegian guy.
So, all right. So,
and that's something that people don't know much about Mormons. It's hard for them to understand.
Is this idea of choosing your parents and choosing your NDE part of the LDS background, or what?
Yeah.
It is?
Well, it's somewhat, yes, it is.
I didn't know that.
And that Archibald Gardner, he's my great-grandfather, born in Kilsyth, Scotland, and that's exactly where my oldest daughter is, with her family, visiting her son, who's on finishing his master's degree at University of Edinburgh right now, and they live a half hour away from his house where I went and saw it, and I even saw his birth certificates in the town library when I visited there. And when he was there, his dad, that was when they were in the 1700s. Anyway, that's when they had the do you remember about English history about they had the Jacobean scare?
I think so. I mean, that was the whole, if you were a Jacobite and stuff.
Right. And so he left and came to Canada because he didn't want to be a Jacobite. And so then when he was in Canada is where he then, the missionaries from the LDS Church went and converted him there, somewhere in the middle of Canada. And then so he's coming across to go across the river there, and it was the dead of winter. And so when he got there, it's people trying to kill him. The LDS first beginning, people treated Mormons very badly. And so, like Joseph Smith, our first prophet, was killed, and so that was very typical to be scared out of town if they didn't like you. And so that's what my grandfather did. And so he came across to go right there at the river, the border between Canada and United States. They're supposed to cross the border, and the water froze up. And so he was gonna go across, and then it broke up and it started moving, and it's scary and it broke up in pieces of hunks and go moving down the river, which is very scary to get across that river. And he just knew that he had to get across because he had people coming behind him. So he knelt down and prayed, and I read his whole prayer when I was like 10 or something, 11 years old, when I first started wanting to know more about the gospel. Is I read my great-grandfather's testimony, his prayer, asked for safety, and so it was so interesting. There was the whole thing and how he jumped from ice floe to ice floe to get across into the United States. That was my first experience of wanting to get my own belief from my ancestors.
Are there any parts of your NDE that correlate or you notice within LDS?
Well, I think somewhat, yes. In that my experiences about a garden, and it felt familiar to me and strong. And so all I know is that when I was a young child and was praying, I keep having these, all my whole life I'd had these experiences, sort of like visions that would happen to me in the future. Like I was sort of about how I came here and I was protected in heaven to be here, and that I was even warned in one vision that I would have this accident, and that Christ would be there for me. I knew that when I had it. I said, this is what that dream is about. So I had a lot of, so everything that happened to me, it didn't scare me. It's like I was prepared for it in advance.
Would you say that the garden was a random garden, even though it was beautiful, or would you say it's the Garden of Eden?
I don't think it's random. I think it's more like the Garden of Eden. If I knew what that is. I just know that it was someplace where Christ was, so it had to be someplace heavenly, in my opinion.
This is kind of off the subject a little bit, but is it true that the LDS kind of keeps track of everybody, like they're involved with Ancestry.com, and they believe that at some point everybody's going to come back?
Oh, yes. We're very big into genealogy. What I mean by that is that you write down all your, as a teenager, I went and took a genealogy class and when I was in high school, and they were teaching how to find out all your records and fill out your family ghost sheet that you take into the temple to show who you related to. And so and I did that, and I still have that sheet with me today.
There is a temple very close to me, a big, beautiful temple. And I've heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but can you go to the temple and the people there will actually help you with your genealogy?
Well, they not inside the temple. You have to have little centers outside in the visiting area, but inside the temple, you can't go in to help. You have to actually have to be prepared, and they expect you there. And because now since COVID, you have to call and make an appointment. Like I have an appointment to go to the temple on Tuesday with a bunch of ladies who are going to drive me down to the Meridian Temple at the 10:30 session. And so I got that on my schedule, and someone's going to pick me up at about 8:45, and we're going to drive down there and go. And you have to call in, and you have to give them your temple record, your membership number from your temple recommend, so they know you.
So would you say that your NDE strengthened your faith in LDS?
I would say it did, yes. much so. And so I feel like it, and I believe that I'm a step further than I was before my NDE. So, and I was working that time full time as an RN and caring for people. So I was sort of and caring for people dying. So I was working that kind of stuff. But after I became the patient, then I said, oh, this is what I was doing all this stuff that made me know how important that was. And so I've gone on the, a year or so after my near-death experience, the Nevada Nursing Association, they asked me to come and speak at their dinner, and so I was one of the main speakers. So I spoke about it, and I handed out near-death experiences to all the nurses in the room.
Have you had any?
And my dad and my husband photographed me doing that.
Oh. Have you had any negative after effects from your NDE?
To be quite honest, I don't think I have. It's all been positive.
Well, that's great. While you were there, did you see anybody else besides Jesus, like angels or other beings?
I did see other beings, but I only talked directly with him.
Were they like ghostly beings, or were they like people or angels, or do you recall?
They were like people. They were like people that were crowded together, all gathered together to be close to Christ, and I didn't see any physical attributes or nothing. They just looked like a bunch of nice people. They had good feeling. It was like you're doing a full meeting, a church meeting, for general conference or something. You got a room full of people, and it's like people like that, and you couldn't tell who any of those were exactly unless you saw them listed on the stand were speaking. But then you just knew there were a whole bunch of people that you associate with, and you knew.
Did you and Jesus review your life, like a life review?
Yes, I did. And so, like, I knew that I knew exactly. He knew about my life and everything that happened, and he sort of expressed to me he knew and he was happy with how I lived my life, and I knew what I was going to happen in the future. There was absolutely. I felt like it was Judgment Day because I felt I wasn't fearful of anything. I knew it was going to happen, and he knew too.
Now, while you were there, did you experience God at all?
No, I did not.
All right.
To me, Jesus was good enough.
Yeah, that would work for me.
Yeah, it did for me.
Can you recall that you noticed anything else with your other symptoms? I mean, with your other senses? Like, did you hear anything else, like music? Did you happen to smell anything, taste anything, or touch anything, even though when you touched the water, you felt nothing?
I wouldn't say I felt nothing. I could just feel like a sort of like a buzzing in my hands, but it wasn't water. I just know that I knew it was some sort of substance, but it wasn't water.
Would you say it would be energy?
Could be, yes.
Like electricity or something?
Something like that. It felt different. All I know is it wasn't anything I could hold or touch, but it was different than water. But it was something I could feel.
Do you think, like, if you would have touched the trees or anything, they wouldn't have been solid either? Like, everything wasn't solid. It was just kind of in an energetic form? That's
possible, because when I was walking, I don't remember walking on solid ground. I remember just sort of like floating on the air. I don't quite know how to explain that.
Interesting. I felt like I cut you off. Were you going to say something else?
I was just asking if I had any different experiences from coming out of my. I know that I had different things happen to me as I was awakening and returning to have my brain return to full cognition and stuff. And I don't know how much that had to do with my near-death experience and my head injury, but I am a totally different person with different priorities, and I do different things.
Wow. So you think you're not sure if that's due to your head injury or due to your NDE or both?
I think it's both. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm divorced now, living alone. And you know what? I'm happier now than I've ever been.
Have your friends said anything to you like, wow, you're such a different person now?
Yes. My ex-husband kept saying, you're a totally different person. Had to learn me all over again. He said that many times.
What about anybody else?
All my kids, all my siblings say the same thing, and so do my parents. But then they got to know me better, and my mom and dad had now been dead for about 10 or 5 years each. They've been dead for quite some time. But and then I had one sister I was very close to, just died last January. And it was interesting is that the experience of death, and when the spirit leaves, is that it's a different experience for me now. And I wasn't able to go to her funeral because I had two sons who came all the way from Sacramento to get me and take me. And then they came with them, they brought a test me to take a COVID test because I had a cold and said, you got COVID, so I didn't even get to go. So I was not happy. But my daughter came over and we prayed about it, and we saw the whole, my sister's whole funeral on my TV off of her laptop, and watched the whole thing. And I could just feel sound and spirit there. And I can feel people from the other side more than I ever could before. I'm one, and it's only people that have my good intentions. I never feel anything bad. I think that I'm a loved daughter of God, and I'm protected from that kind of stuff, so I feel safe.
Have you told anybody within the church, and if so, what was their reaction?
Well, initially they liked it a whole bunch, and that's what got me to the one girl I told it to. She worked for the city of Las Vegas, and she was a computer expert or something. And so she put together my first website called Derry's Near-Death Experience and Special and Spiritual Poetry. I didn't know anything about computers, but she taught me how to do all that kind of stuff. And then I had that for like till AOL and down, and now I got one back up again on another site. And so my near-death experience, and I've read about 80 different poems that are all over the internet. Just put in my name, Derry Bresee, and then spiritual poetry and my near-death experience. A lot of that comes up online. I've been online for years.
And so those are poems about your NDE?
Most of them, yes.
Oh, that's great.
Related, it was spiritual poetry. I do not write poetry unless it's spiritual.
Were you a poet before your NDE?
No, I was not.
Again, do you?
And I could send you one page. That is one of those pages, and maybe I'll do that. That's got several of my different poems on that with my near-death experience on it. I thought I sent it to you. Maybe I didn't.
I'm not sure. You might have. Do you think that you became a poet because of your NDE or your head injury?
I think it's nip and tuck, either one.
That's great. So do you have a website up and running now that we can go check out your poetry?
Yes, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember it exactly. And it's on this thing here, and I don't know if I can find it.
Well, why don't afterwards just send me a link, and I'll put it in the video description. So if people want to go read your poetry.
I will do that. I will do that. I've got one that's got the near-death experience and about 4 or 5 different poems in there.
Great. Are you considering compiling them all into a book?
I was going to do that, but now that I'm divorced and alone, I don't know if I want to bother. And all my paperwork, my husband decided to divorce me in Thailand, and so to make it an easy divorce for him, instead of having me fly home to where we lived in Las Vegas, he sent me home beforehand. He wanted to send me alone and have my kids meet me at the airport. And my daughter said, "You can't do that to Mother," because I had a head injury from my near-death experience, and the surgery said she can't be in the airport all by herself. So she made my ex-husband send her the money there and back to go and pick me up in Thailand. And then her younger brother, my two oldest kids, flew to get me and flew me back. And she did it on her Christmas vacation, because she's a school teacher for the Weezer School District. And so she waited, and we flew into San Francisco Airport, and she waited there in the airport to get the plane, to catch a plane to go back a few hours later on the day, to go back to Boise. And then she drove home so she could start school the next day. And at Weezer Community School. And my son, who came with me, he had a friend meet us at the airport with his car, and we drove back to Sacramento. And I have 3 sons in Sacramento and a bunch of grandkids, and a new grandson who was born while I was in the over the ocean.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
When you were in the hospital, and you first came out of your coma, were you already aware of your NDE right then and there? And if so, did you tell your nurses or doctors about it?
Well, I didn't. I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks, and then when they transferred me to a place where, and I wasn't in a hospital then. I was in my own room, and I had to, and then like in a nursing home, but the nurses, and so they were caring for me, and so that's why I woke up. I did not wake up at all in the hospital. When my family came to visit me, I was totally out of it.
It sounds like you were in like one of those rehab type of facilities.
Yeah, I was in a rehab. I was in a rehab place when I came to, and all of my family had left, and actually when I came to, my brother, my younger brother, he came all the way from Canada and jumped the border because he didn't want to, and he's going to be arrested by the police in America, so he jumped the border and came from Canada to see me, and so that's the first. And so, and he was, and it was about the day before I came to, and he was wandering around my house, and he'd never been there. And so my daughter-in-law was living there, and she's asking who he was, and said, "Oh, I'm Derry's brother." And so that's how. And then they called my husband at work and told me Evan's around. So when I came to, I saw Evan later that day.
So once you came to, did you immediately remember your NDE? And if so, did you tell your nurses or the doctors there about it?
I know I told my family who came to visit me. I had to think about it, and it's a little bit hard to talk about to nurses about it because it's something a little personal, and you got to think and get your thoughts in order. And I was just lucky enough to be able to think and get up and go to the bathroom and stuff. You don't talk about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so when I had people come and visit me from the winter, my ward came and visit me. As I was telling you, they came and visited me, and they had a Breezeboard record, and I had come to so I could write stuff down because nobody could understand me because I had really slurred speech. I still have a bit of it left, but that's I'm gonna have it for life. Along with double vision, I haven't driven since.
Right.
And so she came in and she's the one who said she was just trying to get me to talk, and then to keep trying to get me to write, and I don't write with my right hand. I'm strictly a left-handed person. And then she said, "Well, she's right-handed, left-handed." So she's the one that made the nurse can't turn it over. And I don't think that my ex-husband, my husband at the time, was there long enough to. I just know that she's the one who said something. I don't know if he knew too, but who cares who said it first?
Right. When you first woke up, were you immediately thinking like, "Oh my gosh, I was just with Jesus. It was so amazing, and now I'm back here"?
It's hard for me to say exactly what I was thinking at the time because I wasn't clear-headed. I just knew that I was back in my body, and I was thankful. And I think I was thinking of things in little segments versus big paragraphs, like, because I'm a big talker and a writer, and I wasn't thinking the way I do now then.
Well, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions or chit chat with you. Are you open to that? And if so, how should they contact you?
I used to have all that ability when I was married before, and I don't have all the computer stuff to do that now. And all I have is one little iPhone and the tablet which I'm talking on. And I've got got more computer stuff that my kids gave me for a couple of Christmas ago, but I haven't really set it up yet. And so I'm just making do with what I've got. And they can, if they go to DerryB52gmail.com, and that'll pull up, and then they go to my Facebook profile page or messenger page. I will answer them there.
All right. Well, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
It was quite a dramatic thing to change my life, and I've got some detractions that I can no longer drive, and I have double vision, and I can't work at the nurse anymore. but I'm glad that I had this experience. It changed my life for the better. And I like where I'm going.
Derry, thank you for that message, and thank you again for being my guest. I wish you the best and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.